In this module, we're going to be reading a book called Moments of Being. The first thing you need to know is that Virginia Woolf never prepared a book for publication called Moments of Being. This book is a compilation of Woolf's autobiographical writing that was assembled by your editor. This book was assembled and published after Woolf's death, and Woolf took no part in the preparation of this volume. Instead, it was put together by a scholar, using papers that had been part of Woolf's estate and had passed eventually to collections in the British Library and at the University of Sussex. The first edition of the book you're reading was published in 1976, but in 1980, some additional papers that revised and expanded on some of the rough notes your editor relied on in the 1976 edition came to light, and a second edition incorporating these papers was published in 1985. It's important to pay attention to the kinds of documents collected in this volume. Woolf was tinkering with the idea of writing an autobiography. Certainly, many readers and scholars were clamoring for one, but she didn't finish writing one, so the material is less worked over, less edited than a text she would have actually published. The book you have contains a piece called Reminiscences, written in 1907 when her first nephew was born. 4 pieces from the Memoir Club, a group of Woolf's friends who wrote and presented papers to one another, and a piece called A Sketch of the Past, which is Woolf's first attempt to set down on paper some things from her early life that she might want to contemplate in a formal autobiography. The texts range in date from 1907 to 1940, just prior to Woolf's death in March 1941. Reminiscences, the oldest of the texts in your volume, was written to mark the birth of Vanessa Stephen Bell's first child, Julian. Woolf began the text while her sister was pregnant with the baby, but finished it after his birth. In this text, she is trying to make a record for the new baby of the lives of his mother's generation in their own youth. When you read the text, you will see that although the baby is ostensibly the audience for the writing, it's really his mother Woolf is writing to. Vanessa was a painter, and by virtue of being older than Virginia, took the position of mother to Virginia after the successive deaths of their actual mother and their older sister, Stella. You can hear how hard Virginia is working to get her sister's approval in the document. It's important to pay attention to the mode of address in each of the texts you'll be reading here. Here, Woolf uses we and your mother as she addresses the child, and, maybe, also the mother. The contributions to the Memoir Club range in date from around 1920 to around 1936. The Memoir Club was a group of friends, all intellectuals, who got together to listen to one of them read a paper about some idea or some event from earlier in their life. This group of people was unsentimental, even acerbic. They valued not just candor, but a certain insouciance in addressing the events of one's own life. If you talked about an event like childhood sexual abuse in this setting, you had to make it shocking, or better yet, funny. Think about the tone of these pieces as you read them. What persona was Woolf trying to present to this group of harsh critics? How much of what you read can you take as true, and how much do you need to consider instead the need of Woolf to demonstrate that she fit in with this group of people, the core of which were friends of her brothers and husband from Cambridge? A Sketch of the Past is the text that may seem the most Woolf-like of all the pieces in Moments of Being. In this text, Woolf is just thinking on paper, remembering things, trying to put pieces together. She is drafting, so she doesn't care very much about things like coherence or good grammar. She was not writing this for publication at all, just for her own use, partly thinking of maybe writing an autobiography, partly trying to understand herself and her own past. Woolf uses I consistently in this document. She is not creating any editorial distance as she writes, and doesn't observe the usual niceties of formal writing. There are 2 distinct manuscripts for this text, one more polished than the other, but still informal. And there are also a lot of bits that she cut out, but kept with her papers. This is the piece where Woolf speaks most frankly about things she experienced and how they made her feel. She talks about having experienced sexual abuse in childhood, but in quite a different tone from the way she talked about it in the Memoir Club contribution. You will find her, in this piece of writing, as inquisitive as ever. She doesn't accept any memory at face value, but is always probing. Am I remembering this correctly? Where did this feeling come from? As you read the various pieces included in Moments of Being, stay aware of tone. It differs wildly from piece to piece. What is Woolf telling you through the tone of each piece? You can also pay attention to Woolf's experiments. Now, I know that by this point in the semester, we expect Woolf to always be trying new things. But here in this life writing, we can think about when she experiments, how she experiments, what modes her experiments take, and even the relationship of her experiments to her audience. We remember from modern fiction that Woolf is very interested in life or spirit, truth or reality. Whatever you call it, life is the essential thing in fiction. Thinking about what Woolf said about life in modern fiction, which of the pieces of writing in Moments of Being do you think are most interested in capturing that? Which are most successful at capturing that? Do you think there is a relationship between greater privacy of the writing and greater success at representing life in the way Woolf thought was essential for modern writers? And how would you say that the writing in Moments of Being helps us understand Woolf's fiction or other writing? What does it show us about her interests, about the things that challenge her as a writer?